Welcome to another episode of Peers Over Beers, your favorite digital and social evangelist podcast with your industry veteran hosts, Chris Detzel. This podcast starts now.
All right. Welcome to another Peers Over Beers. I'm Chris Detzel and
I'm Nicole Saunders.
hey, Nicole, how are you?
I'm good. It is, we're in the middle of summer. It's gorgeous here. It's not too hot yet.
Well, and you're in Michigan or no, Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah, you're lucky. You guys, well, it gets hot there sometimes, right?
It does. It'll get in the 90s for sure.
Okay. Well, I'm in Dallas, Texas, and it's hot as hell.
Oh boy. So yeah. How you doing? You keeping cool?
I'm trying, I'm a big runner. And so like yesterday, we have this thing on Thursdays. It's called Dallas Dirt Runners. And we meet at this park. It's 6 p.m. or 5:30 p.m. And so that's the hottest time is 103. And so I only got 3 miles in because I was dying, but it's really difficult to get your exercise in, because it's just really so hot,
I was going to say, even here, I go running at like 7 a.m. So it's like 60 something out.
Nice. Well, today it was 80 something out in the morning.
Oof.
Yeah.
Well, stay hydrated, man.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's not what we're going to talk about today, but
no.
So we could.
We could. It's the Peers Over Beers running episode.
Yeah, and how much running do you do a week? Anyways, so one of the things that we talked about during the pre-show, talked about a bunch of different things, but was thinking about customer success and community and how they kind of work together and how we think about strategies, with the customer success teams. Because why? They have the relationships, right, with customers, or at least the people using the products on a daily basis. We're product community. So it just seems to make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I've given that a lot of thought over the years, especially, our organization's a little bit larger. And so we have sort of different tiers of success where we have some accounts that have a dedicated representative, others that get access to what's called scaled success. And when you start looking at like a one-to-many format of a, success rep that maybe works with a few hundred different customers in small bits and pieces, there starts to be a lot of overlap with community. And we've had a lot of conversations about how we can support one another and how we make it easy for customers to access the things that team is doing. So it really is an important group of people to get to know because they're interacting with customers just like you are. And I think it's helpful for both sides to know what the other one's doing and know what kind of engagement those customers are getting from both teams.
What do you think? So as you kind of started the community and then as you kind of scaled your community over the years, and I've got my thoughts here, but how did you start working with them and what, how do you think about it now? Because it's something that I feel like I continuously struggle with is that you start getting some buy-in, get some, you talk to them and they get excited, but then maybe organizational changes happen and things like that. There's a new leader and things. So now you got to kind of go back. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure over the years you've had to deal with a lot of that stuff. How do you think about that and how have you dealt with it in the past? How do you deal with it now? That kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Well, so when I came into Zendesk, the community had actually already been around for about 8 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I sort of came into what was already a mature, if not fully built out community, right? It had some established cultural norms, there were some systems and processes in place. The moderator program already existed. At that time, the person who'd been running community kind of wanted complete control over it. And so the rule for employees was you don't go in the community unless you're invited. Right. So she created a ticket and sent it in and somebody was invited, they would come join. And so I was really building relationships from scratch with a lot of folks to get them into the community because I wanted to flip that model on its head and be like, hey, this is everybody's community. I want as many voices and experts over here as we can get. And so, I think I've talked before about my Zoom coffees where back in the day, like this would have been more in office.
I remember this. Yeah.
But like, I literally just started being like, okay, who do I know that knows someone in success? Great. Can you introduce me? Awesome. And then I just sit down and have coffee with that person and be like, okay, so what's your job? What do you do? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you struggling with? And I would just look for places where the community could potentially help. And then I'd be like, okay, well, here's a little bit about what we do. And here's a connection I see. Here's something that I think we could do together. And so it took some time. It took a little while to go around and be like, okay, who should I talk to next? And eventually kind of working my way up and then getting to know the leaders of some of the teams. And then the first big thing that we really did is we created some basically internal enablement. So we put together a little presentation about the community, just to help people understand what it was. And I was talking with somebody about this the other day. Oh, I was talking with you about this last week. Good memory, Nicole. I made the metaphor about like a rock band having to play the same song all the time, right?
Yeah.
And it was that same story of in community, you have to tell your story over and over, right? And it is so easy to assume, well, our stuff is public. Of course, everyone in the company just knows about it and looks at it all the time. And it was amazing how many people like didn't even know we had a community or thought it was like just for developers or something like that. So we put together this presentation and I went around to all of the different team leaders and asked them if I could get 5 minutes on their next team meeting agenda, and just went in and presented what we do. And the last slide is always how you can help, right? And we talked about things they could promote, things that we could do to help them. And then out of that always come a couple follow-up meetings with people who are really interested and excited to say, oh, I really want to do this thing. And so that was how we started building those relationships. Is first, it was me getting to know everybody, kind of having that warm introduction, and then going around and doing some enablement with all the teams. And we do enablement like that multiple times a year for different groups across the business.
And do you let so since you now have, a fairly, I'd say big, but, a team, do you kind of let your team or push your team to kind of do some of that stuff? Because you used to do all that.
Absolutely.
You still don't, but, I'm sure it's a different level. How do you get your team involved and engaged, and how do you kind of get them to do it? You know what I mean?
To do the enablement piece, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the first was taking everybody around to these meetings with me so they could just see how it was done and get familiar with like, what kinds of questions am I going to get? How do I need to pace this? What kinds of things do I need to share? Then I did some workshops with my team specifically, just talking about like, sort of like, some people call it levels of fidelity or granularity or, what level you fly out. But the idea of like, okay, what is too many details for people that aren't familiar with community, and what is not enough information for people that don't actually know what we're talking about? So that you get things at a level where people will understand what you're talking about and not get overwhelmed or confused. And that is a really important part of communications to learn. And then from there, I'd have them practice giving the presentation to the team, maybe a little bit. Sometimes I even now have Jim, I just say, hey, I need you to put together training and go do it for these teams. And here's the list of people to get on their meetings. Because my team's gotten really good at it. And, different people work on different parts of the community, but they're each experts in their domain. And so that's really cool. But I think building those relationships has been key, but none of it would work if we didn't have ways that we could help them accomplish their goals, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody is too busy. Even the kindest people are probably too busy to do something just to help you out. Now and then it happens and it's amazing. But for the most part, it's always about that initial conversation where I went out and figured out what are you guys struggling with, and what do I have that can help overcome that, or help boost your numbers or help your engagement. And I think that's the key. Anytime you're trying to build a relationship with another team, you need to figure out what's mutually beneficial.
What do you think about? So I'll give you some idea or some thoughts around how I've thought about this and even tried to implement, and to some degree it's worked and to some degree it hasn't. But my thinking is how do you start thinking about this piece of it, when a customer becomes a customer in the beginning, right? So onboarding, when you think of all the things that a customer can do, whether it's training, being part of the community, being part of docs or support, how do you do all these things after you become a customer? And one of the things I've always thought is important is, putting yourself in the very beginning of the customer journey,
Yes.
Because when we first started building that out 2 years ago, we didn't even have, like a journey line thing for customers, like at all, what's there from a customer success standpoint. So I started kind of getting these conversations of, hey, look, there's a lot of different things. One of the things that a customer can do is engage with their peers in the community. We have this community, blah, blah, blah. And so for a while, every customer it would at the very least get a link to the community, and this is how you log in. So like you said, you build a presentation from kind of what does community bring and those kinds of things. So I think that's one way to kind of embed community into the first part of the customer journey. Now, there's customers that have been customers for a long time that they don't get that, because they've been customers for a long time. So there's probably different stages of how you would want to try to engage those customers, and how do you, it could be to where, I've even been part of calls with the AEs. So before a customer becomes a customer, they're a prospect, because some people want to engage in communities before, they want to look at the community and things like that. And so getting on a call to say, hey, this is what we've done, here's some programs we have, and those kinds of things. So not just working with the CSM. Go ahead.
It's a great point, right? If you're looking at a piece of software, you want to understand, like, how do other users feel about it?
Yeah.
We all know, there's a reason that there's sales references, right? It's because another customer saying, yep, I've done that thing using this tool and it worked, carries way more weight than anybody who's paid to talk about your company.
That's right.
Saying, yeah, our software can do that. And so, I think that there's huge value in that. And you're right. Like, you have to get customer in, or community in, right at the beginning of the customer journey, right?
Yeah.
Because you need to make it a place that they're always going to come to. So those are great points. And I think it's so good that you've done that.
And I think some other ways to kind of think about it is, look, when a customer is inside the product for the first time and they're doing some stuff, they become a customer. And to me, this is still sort of part of customer success, but it's more about how do you make sure community is seen and obviously relevant. So if there's ways, look, probably getting off topic here, but if there's ways that your community, whether it's a link directly inside the product, whether it's a space inside of the product, and those kinds of things, those are also different ways to kind of, push internally, the community story, and we've done a lot of those kinds of things, to really make that relevant. But getting back to kind of this customer success things, what do you do now? Like, because I've been thinking about this for a little bit, because, we've had not necessarily turnover, but changes within the organization. We talked about a lot of that last week, but to where now they're not really thinking about it, or maybe they are sort of, but it's not really. Is it still in the journey? How do you go back and look at that documentation? How do you go back and look at emails being sent to new customers and making sure your stuff is still being seen through the customer success eyes? There's a lot to think about, and I get overwhelmed sometimes about, geez, I need to go back to these guys and really, tell the story again. You know what I mean?
I'll tell you what, having a lot to think about and getting overwhelmed by it is the story of the life of a community manager.
Yeah.
I look at everything that we encompass and everything we do. Sometimes it's like, oh my goodness, it's amazing that we keep track of all of this stuff, and we do, but it's because you gotta sort of like go back and revisit things on a regular basis, to your point. So you're right. Organizational change can make it hard, right? Because you can have a leader that's totally bought in on working with community. You can have teams that are super familiar with it. And then things change, right? Yeah. Teams move, maybe the company gets restructured, a new leader comes in, and you got to do it all again. And that is the key, is every time I see a new leader come in for a team, especially one that I work closely with, I have my little presentation ready, and I always introduce myself. I go follow them on LinkedIn, and I send them this email that says, welcome to the organization. I'm so glad that you're here. Settle in for a week or two, but let me get some time on your calendar in a couple of weeks. I'd love to introduce you to community and how our teams collaborate. And I always do that proactive outreach so that I can, again, get in there right up front, help them get familiar with it, especially where there's programs that have dependencies on each other. For example, our scaled success team holds office hours every Wednesday at noon in almost every time zone. And so there's hundreds of these office hours happening throughout the year. And they were having a lot of trouble getting them in front of people. And of course, we use Bevy for our user groups. And I was like, well, so the whole point of our program is we're trying to connect users to experts in a peer-to-peer or one-to-many fashion. And your office hours are all about connecting people in a peer-to-peer and one-to-many fashion. We don't need to do office hours. You guys don't need to do events because we're already doing those. but let's put this all in the same place so users can find it. And so we actually have a Bevy chapter just for what's called Customer Success Live, which is those office hours that everybody can go to. And we put them right next to user groups. And people were disconcerted, right? Because they're like, well, but the community team owns this, but this is a customer success thing, and they're in totally different departments. But I was like, but it makes sense from the customer point of view. And we've managed to work together. And now because we have that dependency, there's a really like solid basis from which we work together, right? Anytime a new leader comes in, I can say, hey, so we support your program because we bring your office hours into the community and we promote it and we cross promote your offerings at our events and vice versa. And so I just wanted to, open up the conversation about how we can continue this relationship and deepen it. And so that's one of the big ways that we really collaborate with success. The other thing that we do is we provide, we work with like the person who runs the communications for that whole part of the organization and make sure that every week they're pushing out, here's the upcoming user groups, here's the upcoming webinars, here's other things that are going on in the community. And the success teams tell us that they find that really helpful because it gives them something that they can reach out to their customers about, right? They can call up somebody and say, hey, just wanted to check in. We've got this cool webinar next week. I know we were talking about reporting a couple of weeks ago, and this one's on reporting, so you should attend that. And by creating those resources and getting them in everybody's hands, it makes it really easy for them to throw a slide in a deck when they have a meeting or send an email to their book of business or whatever they're working with to help promote those community things. And so it gives them a touch point, it gives them content to share, and it helps us promote the events that we want people to come to and connect to and bring people into the community.
It's all relevant to their customer. I mean, it's a no-brainer, but I love these tactics that you bring and programs that you bring to the customer success team. I want to go back to one thing because I'm highly interested in this is the Bevy thing. And so office hours. So CSMs hold their own office hours. So it'd be like Chris Detzel's a CSM. He comes in, he uses Bevy, and he brings in his customers to connect. And so facilitates a conversation through Bevy. Is that right? How does that work?
So basically it's sort of like if you jumped on a Zoom call and said, but we use Bevy, but same idea, right? Like any kind of digital video call and said, hey, I'm going to hang out for the hour. I've got some stuff prepared this week to talk about reporting. Bring your questions. And then we invite people, and usually, it's a handful of people, but then they get this basically one-on-one or a small group to one interaction where they can come in, they can ask questions. The CSM will help answer them, point them towards resources. They can talk to the other folks that are there. And these are, it primarily targets customers that don't have a dedicated CSM that they can call on a regular basis. So it gives them a way that they can get access to a CSM, even if they don't have one dedicated to their account all the time.
I like that. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can kind of do that. You could do like, maybe at CSM office hours, CSMs are running these kinds of meetings, and they could do like peer-to-peer networking or whatever, right? Like, hey, we're having it could be some specific industry, pharmaceutical company or pharma kind of thing. And they can get with other CSMs. And anyways, you're giving me some ideas. But when you think about tracking that, so in Bevy, you can, I'm sure people have to log in with their email or at least give their email. So who is coming to these things. And that's one. And then two is, do you push that somewhere like into the, I don't know, Salesforce to say, hey, this person's never been, but now they're in. And then, you're kind of looking at who's coming, who's not coming. And how do you kind of track that and look at that? So I'm a big data kind of guy, and I'm like,
no, it's super important though. I mean, I was just talking with somebody on my team this week about how he's doing all of this content creation, but then we're not tracking how it's getting used. And so I'm like, is this valuable? Should you be spending time on it? Like, we don't know. We don't even know if this is something people are using. And, if you're not measuring something, it can get very hard to prioritize it or make the case for needing resources. So it is really important to think about how you measure these things. So it did take a little while to get everything set up, but we do have everything from Bevy push over to our CRM. They have some pretty good integrations actually that will help with that. And then that pushes into the dashboards that our success managers look at. And what we did there too, remember a couple weeks ago, I was talking about how important it is to measure things the same way that other teams measure them.
Yep.
So we make sure that the community stuff shows up right alongside the scaled success stuff. And so then the success manager can go in and see, oh, this customer has gone to 2 user group meetups and 1 office hours and 3 webinars.
Love it.
And now I know what content they've seen recently. I know how engaged they are. Next time I'm on a call with them, I can ask how those things went and if they needed any follow-up resources. And so, you do have to work with your internal teams and get things prioritized. And this is certainly the kind of thing that's probably easier at a smaller organization, to be honest. But if you can, it's not. It's because then it's tricky, no matter what you're doing.
Resources, you know what I mean? So there's always
you either don't have them or you're competing for them. I'll tell you what.
Exactly. Yes.
But if you can get everything set up that way, it's really helpful. And again, that's where I can go back to the success leaders and say, hey, look at this. We're seeing that X% of people that come to one of these things end up going to the other one, or we're seeing that customers that engage in both of these things have a healthier account score, or whatever those things are. We now have that information and we can really show how we're helping impact their team's numbers. And that at the end of the day is what has really continued to build that relationship and keep everybody invested, as we can say, look, we know that by doing this, we're getting more people in front of your success folks. And, we know that that's working really well. And we've done that with every team that we cross collaborate with. We can now show the impacts that we've had on amplifying each other's work.
Do you guys use Gainsight for your customer success stuff and then push Bevy into that? Or is that out of curiosity? Because we have Gainsight.
Yeah, it is one of the tools that we use for sure.
Okay. And that's okay. No, you just got me spinning here. You're saying so many good things. It's really good.
Well, good. But, I think this is such an important topic because I know I'm sitting here sounding like we've got it all figured out at the same time. One of the challenges that we're having right now is that what we're hearing from our go-to-market teams is there's so many different things that we're trying to push out to customers. We want to tell them about our AI stuff. We want to tell them about our webinars. We want to tell them about our corporate social good. We want to tell them about our community. Even within community, I'm like, invite them to be a group leader or join a group or suggest a chapter or be a luminary or come to a webinar, right? And they're just like, it's too many messages. And so one of the things that we're trying to figure out is how do we keep it simple enough, again, to not overwhelm those teams and not have them overwhelm their customers with like, here's 36 things you can do. And like, it's amazing that we offer all of that. But that's where we're starting to try to get really targeted with like, who exactly should get which messages and how do we help our CSMs filter that so that it is a manageable thing. And so, even once you get the relationships established, even once you get the dashboards in place and everything's humming along, it's still constantly evolving and there's new challenges that come up. And, you said at the top of the hour, like you can get new leadership. We just had a pretty big restructuring a couple of months ago that totally changed even the way that some of these teams are operating and the objectives that they have. And so we're having to like reconfigure like, okay, well, now what's relevant? Now what matters most? Who are the people we need to be in touch with now? So, you do have to revisit it every couple months and make sure that you're keeping up with what's priority for them.
You make such an interesting point to go back on the programs that you guys have. And, when you look at community and even other departments, we have our own programs. Why? To engage our customers the way they want to be engaged, because people engage in different ways. It could be user groups, it could be forums, it could be webinars, it could be chat, I don't know, whatever. A lot of different things,
different learning
hours,
styles, different needs, different abilities, some people can attend webinars, some can't.
That's right. And you guys have done a great job. It sounds like of creating a bunch of awesome, programs, but the opportunity is you have so many programs is that what is probably hard for the organization to keep up with of, when you think of, okay, I'm going to CSM. Hey, CSM, I have, user groups, I have forums, I have this, that, or the other. And then you guys have this, and then the marketing team has this, and then so-and-so, you know what I mean? It just becomes overwhelming. And so how do you I have some ideas of how you, or at least sort of spinning in my mind around, okay, when you have too many programs, you really have to kind of go back and say, what is actually working? So you look at the data, say this many people are coming, but really what's the business impact of each of those programs? You have to start looking at those kinds of things, which I'm very impressed with what you guys are doing, even from the data standpoint. I mean, it's really fun to listen. Like, I didn't know you were doing all this stuff. I did and it didn't. But as I kind of dive into more of these things, and as you and I have these more of these conversations, I'm learning a ton. And it's like, I'm thinking this way, but I don't get to do all this stuff. But
well,
it sounds
remember,
like
it's also taken
things.
us like almost 7 years
Yeah.
to get there. Like the Luminaries program, which is our brand advocate program, just launched this summer. User groups just launched last year.
Yeah.
Events have been going for about 4 years. So, you build up over time and you add on one piece at a time to do it. But to your point, yeah, you do need to understand what is driving value, what's not. We definitely look a lot at like, are any of these things cannibalizing each other? Right? Like, are we pushing this event so hard that people aren't showing up to this thing? The other thing is you have to get so crisp on your messaging. Who exactly is this for? What exactly is this about? And people will still get confused and conflate things. Like a lot of people are like, oh, Luminaries, those are the people that run the user groups, right? And it's like, no. Totally different program.
Yeah.
You can be in both, but they're totally different subsets. And so I created some slides that really outline like, okay, let's say that you have a customer and they're really enthusiastic and they want to engage with Zendesk. Here's all the different things we offer. If they are someone who really wants to share their knowledge or has a lot of questions that they want to hear from other users, the online discussion forum might be a really good place for them to go and engage. And they could potentially become a community moderator if they want to be a leader in that space. If they want to do those things, but the written format really isn't their jam, and they really kind of want to talk to other people, they should join a user group. And if they want to be a leader, they can become a user group leader. If there's someone who's just really excited about Zendesk and sort of wants to share their love for the software, or they're trying to really build up their professional persona, maybe Luminaries, the brand advocacy program, is the right spot for them, because that tends to focus less on the technical how-tos and more on the like sharing, how Zendesk has improved your support experience, or getting to even just do things like reshare stuff on social media if you just really want to tie your personal brand to Zendesk, which a lot of people do. And so when I started sort of almost like mapping it out like a chart where it's like, do they want to do this? Yes, go here. Do they want to do this? No. Okay, don't go there. It helped people wrap their heads around, okay, these are like different places that we can funnel people to engage them around the kinds of questions they have, the kinds of knowledge they want to share, and the kinds of people that they want to network with. And so that's really where we have all of these different little things. And a lot of people, honestly, are part of all of them, or a part of several of them. And so that's a key too. We definitely look at user groups as our front door. That's sort of the lowest hanging fruit. Almost everybody's willing to like hop on a Zoom call with a handful of other people and hear what they have to say. The forums can be, but I almost feel like you end up with more lurkers there, whereas at least in user groups, people are showing up. And then from there, oftentimes once people start to engage, that's where they start to get funneled more towards like a brand advocacy program or towards being a leader in one of these spaces.
Yeah, it's funny. We started out with customer success, and this is all relevant, and we kind of start talking about programs and things. But those are all relevant because they want their customers to engage, right, in some kind of area. And it's kind of shocking to me that sometimes, and maybe it's not shocking, but in general, like for you and I, our customer success teams are completely in a different organization and than our community teams. And something that I've had to kind of really think about this year was, how do I build my kind of plan on a page? And so my plan on a page says, basically, these are all the things I'm going to accomplish this year. And, I kind of, generally a plan on the page looks at your particular organization, in my mind, or in my thinking is community, looks at marketing's plan on a page and kind of funnels down. But in this case, you can't do that 100% with community because I touch customer success, I touch product, I touch marketing, a lot of different things. So how do I kind of take their goals and initiatives and push a little bit of that into mine? Because, community is not just a marketing thing. It just isn't, and it's not just customer success thing. So it's like kind of, it's just difficult, when you're building your plan on the page and then saying, okay, boss, I'm doing this. Okay, yeah, I completely understand. And then you get a new boss, you gotta redo it. But the point is that you've got to have some of that. I think your plan on the page or your strategy, from community has to touch that customer success, because customer success and community is key at the end of the day. And it, just having this conversation helps me to say, look, I got to go talk to Brent. He's our customer success leader.
Absolutely.
Well,
so I mean, a couple things there. One, like when you talk about that plan on a page, I often have bullet points that are like, support the customer product feedback initiative, support the one-to-many, product support initiative, right? And so I'm talking about programs that are running in other departments where I'm like, I'm a key stakeholder in this. I'm heavily leaning into it. And so like one of my objectives this year is to have a community impact on that program. And so I call that out and just highlight it very directly in that way. But yeah, I think, community and success, it's so important, especially from a scaled success perspective.
Yeah.
Because a lot of those folks, that they get to reach out to those customers 2, maybe 3 times a year. And it's usually around their renewals, right?
That's right.
And so in the interim, a lot of those customers aren't getting a lot of direct support and help. And they hold those office hours, but like they can only do so much because they're handling so many customers. And that's where we can really come in and help augment that and say, hey, I know that you don't get to reach out to your customer, but like, let's get them in a webinar. Let's get them in a user group. These are all things where they can build that relationship with the brand. They can get help. They can learn about stuff. And you guys don't have to do it. Like we're doing that for you in community. And so, and in some ways, like, on the one hand, I think that there's a great argument to be made for success and community being in the same teams. On the other hand, success often, there are revenue goals and things like that for a lot of those teams. And I like keeping community out of the monetization space that directly. We do measure attribution and things, but we don't necessarily have sales targets, right? We're more focused on retention, education, expansion. But I like having us in different orgs because it does keep us connected to the other parts of the business. And I think that there's actually something really valuable in building those strong connections with other teams that are in totally different parts of the business, because community should be that red thread that goes all the way through.
Yeah, we could probably keep talking about this, but I'm going to just say, this has been very helpful and educational for me.
We can always do a part 2.
Yeah, we definitely need to do a part 2. But Nicole, thank you so much again for coming on and being a consistent speaker here and expert and thought leader in the community space. I certainly appreciate it.
I love our conversations, Chris. And I hope that the other community professionals in the world are finding these things helpful, and if anybody ever has a topic that they'd love to hear us talk about, feel free to let us know. We can riff.
Absolutely. And, certainly link us in or send a message. We want to cover what is relevant today and what you're thinking, but we also want to make sure there's meat on these conversations, which, to me, there always is. So, well, thanks for another Peers Over Beers. I'm Chris Detzel and
I'm Nicole Saunders.
Thanks, Nicole.
Have a great day.
Too.